Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Board. Before we begin, I'll just ask Sue to read our land acknowledgement.
We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial.
Thank you, Sue. And welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge our guests that are with us today. First off, our new detachment commander, Deb McClure. Welcome, Deb. We'll give you a chance in your section of the report unless you'd like to introduce yourself to the board at this point. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. So Deb McClure, I think I've met most of you, but not everyone. And I'm really excited and happy to be here for the first meeting and happy to join the Haliburton Highlands Detachment.
Thank you. And we also have a delegation and presentation later from Lisa Roeder and Janet Fever with the OPP, Municipal Policing Bureau. I think the name has recently changed, but I'll, again, if you'd like to introduce yourself now, we can do that and then turn the floor over to you in a bit for your presentation.
Sure. Thank you for that. So we're happy to be here today. Again, I'm Sergeant Lisa Rotar, and I'm with the Municipal Policing Bureau, now known as Municipal Policing Unit. No service changes, just a name change and a shuffle in our organization. I've been an officer with the OPP for 20 years now. I started my career off in Aurora Highway Safety Division, where I went to Dignitary Protection, followed by Security Inquiries Unit, VICLAS, Violent Crime Linkage Analysis Systems Unit. And then I went to the Ontario Centre for Missing Person and Unidentified Remains. And from there, I've landed here in Municipal Policing Unit. So quite a interesting career path so far, and I still have a lot ahead of me. Really happy to be here today, and I'm looking forward to presenting with my colleague, Janet Fever.
Thank you, Lisa. Janet?
Good morning. I'm Janet Fever. Thank you very much for inviting us to join you today. Pleased to be here. I'm a civilian with the OPP. I've been with the Ontario Public Service for about 25 years. I've done work in human resources, Fleet Supply and Weapons Services Bureau, communications, training, and that sort of thing. So together, Lisa and I bring a lot of different experiences to the table, and we're happy to be here and talk to you about that today.
Thank you. We'll turn the floor over to you in a little bit. So again, just following our agenda, which was all sent to the members of the board ahead of time. They look for a disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any. Seeing none. Adoption of today's agenda for the meeting Wednesday, June 18th. Member Carter, Member Burton. Pam, for the resolution.
Moved by Member Carter and seconded by Member Burton. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 18th, 2025 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Board be approved.
All in favor? Passed. Thank you very much. And next will be the adoption of our minutes from the previous meeting held May 7th, 2025. Again, they were sent to the members in advance by email. And I have a motion. Member Hodgson, Member Shevaduskas.
Moved by Member Hodgson, seconded by Member Shevaduskas. Be it resolved that the minutes from the May 7th, 2025 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board be hereby approved.
All in favor? Approved. Thank you. So next up is item 6 of our agenda, and we have our delegation and presentation from our two colleagues from the OPP. So Lisa and Jenna, we'll turn it over to you. And we do have your slide deck, which will just give us a moment to pull up. There we go. The floor is all yours.
Thank you for that again. And again, thanks for having us here today. So as you know, we're going to be doing a presentation. You can go to the second slide just to go over the overview of what we're going to be talking about. Thanks. So we're going to be covering off OPP service delivery, our financial recoveries and provincial responsibilities under the OPP billing model. We're going to talk about some key changes under the Community Safety and Policing Act, which also includes OPP Detachment Board responsibilities, and we're going to compare it to police service boards. And as you know, the CSPA came into effect on April 1st last year. And here we find ourselves in June, where we're still implementing a lot of those changes through our reports, which again, we will be touching on a little bit later today. So that's pretty much what we're going to be covering. Feel free to ask questions if you'd like at the time or at the end, whatever you're comfortable with. Again, everything we've given to you today is available online. These presentations, all the information that's put into it is again publicly sourced. It's available on opp.ca, a lot of wonderful resources there as well. And if from this meeting you find you have really specific questions related to your municipality, we can go through the channels and actually come do a presentation with your council. As I mentioned earlier, we will be going over the annual billing statements. And for the purpose of today, because we have multiple municipalities at the table, which is wonderful, we're going to be using a generic bill, which again is a snapshot with all available costings that you may or may not see. And you are responsible to ask for a copy of your annual billing statement from your respective municipality. The OPP will not distribute to OPP police service boards, or sorry, OPP detachment boards, or any members as requested. It has to come from the municipality from which you reside in. And they are free to put it on the website. They can publicate it as they wish. We do have some information available, which we'll also touch on later today on our website. Okay. Again, I have also provided a printed copy for you just for the purpose. Some of the print is really fine and it's not so user-friendly on PowerPoint slides. So feel free to refer to that. And again, I've sourced everything if you need to go to the source to find out where it came from. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So I like to talk about our vision as the OPP, Safe Communities, Secure Ontario. It really captures our dual mandate. So we serve municipal policing as well as the provincial. And it drives our operational and strategic priorities. We serve over 14 million people in 330 municipalities. Again, we cover northern remote areas, Indigenous communities, and urban areas as well. And we operate from 148 detachments, 5 regional headquarters, 1 divisional headquarter, 1 general headquarters, and we have 4 provincial communication centers. And again, the real purpose of this is it's okay, go ahead, next slide is great. Our vision is also captured through our strategic priorities. We can't have safe communities and secure Ontario without looking after our people, our work, and our communities. So again, for our people, we focus on the well-being, recruitment, retention, and training of all our members, both uniform and civilian. Again, for our work, we want to focus on operational and investigative excellence, which again, it reinforces our core mandate of effective law enforcement. And for our communities, again, we want to focus on collaborative safety partnerships and recognize trust, transparency, and cultural appropriateness. And that's why we're here today. This is a big part that you play in. And again, thank you for stepping up and representing your communities. Next. So how do we cover policing from a municipal perspective and a provincial perspective? We have something called integrated service delivery, and this is unique to the OPP. Basically, we provide services again. Frontline officers will start at a detachment, and as you know, different municipalities are incorporated within each detachment area. Officers are deployed. They don't specifically stay within one municipality. As we drive, as we go to calls for service, as we go to training, throughout the whole province, an officer can be deployed because the radio is always on. We have technology that tracks and dispatches accordingly. For example, we use something called closest to the call technology, where if we have a priority call that comes in, a hot call, the dispatch will look and we've got the whole screen, our command center is pretty impressive. And they'll say, oh, there's an officer that's coming through. They're on their way to Aurelia headquarters for training. We're going to redeploy them immediately. And they get called over the air and said, hey, turn, go to that call, closest to the call. So we always have officers that are traveling and doing different things and always serving. We don't distinguish between, oh, is this a municipality function or is this a provincial function? It's policing. And the way we differentiate it, though, is through our DARS, our daily activity reporting system. So, as an officer is dispatched or the services that we do, we have to be accountable for that time. And every day, every call, we go in, we put into the computer what we did and how much time we spent and where it was spent. And through that coding, we're able to decipher again, was it a provincial responsibility? Was it a municipal responsibility? How much time was spent doing that call for service? And that helps formulate our OPP billing, which again, we're going to go into extensive um, information about that as well. So this system is really great because again, it allows for flexibility. We access full policing services without operating as a standalone force. It's cost efficiency. So again, we share the administrative and supervisory resources by operating in this model. Again, regional coordination. It allows us to provide policing across boundaries. As you know, crime sees no boundary. Things happen cross-jurisdictional and it just flows from one to the other. So we can dispatch and deploy, use different strategies as needed. And again, partnership opportunities. We engage with agencies beyond our municipal borders. Something like that, we incorporate, for example, our MCERT teams where we use trained professionals, nurses sometimes, often. They'll come out, deploy with the officers. Again, they're not just going to be serving that municipality that they came from. They're going to wherever the call is and they provide that service as needed. Go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Janet.
Okay, on this next slide, this slide effectively shows the cost-sharing structure between municipalities and the province of Ontario in the delivery of OPP services. And it emphasizes the financial scope and the division of those responsibilities that Lisa mentioned, the municipal and the provincial responsibilities. These are estimated costs. On the right-hand side of the page, we see the provincial responsibilities are currently estimated at just over $1 billion for the provincial responsibilities. And these are this money is for services provided to all OPP police municipalities with no cost recovery. This includes traffic safety, major investigations such as homicide, organized crime, intelligence operations, and specialized response teams such as K9 and ERT. The OPP are obligated to provide and maintain these services for the province, which is an added benefit and cost savings for the 330 OPP policed municipalities and the 17 First Nations services that the OPP administers. On the municipal policing recovery side, we see it's estimated at $497.4 million. And this is for the estimated municipal policing recoveries. These are recovered costs from municipalities that involve all resources, including frontline detachment staff, support positions required to meet service demands, which is captured through the billing model. And I'd just like to emphasize that that system Lisa mentioned, the DAR system, it is critical to determine municipal recovery costs and costs for provincial obligations and responsibilities. We take numerous measures to ensure the data integrity at the detachment level, as well as at general headquarters. This contribution reinforces the shared responsibility model under the CSPA, where municipalities pay for local policing needs, while the province supports broader public safety infrastructure and specialized capabilities that transcend these municipal boundaries. Next slide, please.
I'm just going to jump in really fast. Janet, what I forgot to mention to you was when we talked about these services that the OPP provides, both at the municipal and the provincial level, the Auditor General did a value for money audit. And they looked at how the integrated service delivery was implicated, and they support it. And they think it's, it really is beneficial. And again, they help determine what those services are. And, basically we were mandated to improve that. So we have seen a lot of changes, and with that came some costing with it. But just so you know, we are accountable and we're really, grateful that the OPP billing model does show that. And this is what, as we go forward, talking about the break between the municipal policing recoveries and the services provided, we're going to get into more specifics. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask along the way. Thanks.
That's great, Lisa. Thank you. That's an important.
And thanks for that, Lisa. I was just going to ask if, if members have questions, would you like them to stop and ask at that time or hold the questions till the end?
I think maybe just as we get through this, probably at the end, because this may be new information and we may answer those questions that you might have. But as we move forward to each section, that might be a good time if you need to have a question put in there.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so in this slide, we're looking at municipal policing recoveries in a little more detail. So we see the 2025 total estimated municipal policing recovery cost is $497.4 million. This cost includes salaries, benefits, equipment, vehicles, training, buildings, IT, and detachment staff, both uniform and civilian. Detachment staff costs include supervision, frontline constables, and civilian administrative support, which are critical for day-to-day operations. Support and other direct operating expenses, ODOE, those costs encompass a wide range of operational needs, and that includes our communications operators, detachment guards, in-service training, vehicles, uniform and equipment, radios, IT support, and that sort of thing. These items are all essential for the effective service delivery model and for our officers' safety. In summary, municipal policing recoveries includes all costs associated to OPP members providing municipal policing services and functions. Next slide, please. On the provincial responsibilities side, I would just like to emphasize that these funds are not recovered from municipalities. The total cost estimated for this year is just over $1 billion. The OPP has an extensive and dedicated specialized provincial units to respond and provide support as mandated under the CSPA. Some of these units are listed here. They include major crime investigation, anti-terrorism, ERT, canine, intelligence service, and this is just a few. It's not an exhaustive list. So the OPP is securing the province of Ontario in the air, on the water, and on land. So when the critical call comes into town, all these services are engaged and readily available to all municipalities. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now we're going to start getting to more and more of the breakdown. So basically, we're going to have a look. As you'll see, this has been color coded to match the corresponding sections to your annual billing statements as seen on page 1 and 3. So in the pyramid, the base of the pyramid being the base service cost, it's estimated at $236 million, allocated at $189.44 per property across 1,246,809 properties. And this includes household, commercial, and industrial properties. Just so you know, the property counts are updated annually by MPAC, so the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation data. The OPP just obtains that number from them annually. And we have really specific information on what that falls under. If you'd like that information, I'm happy to direct you to that, how that count comes to be through MPAC. For the base services call, these include resources, again, used for proactive policing. So our patrols, traffic complaints, victim support, crime prevention, Liquor License Act offenses, ride programs. This covers uniforms, equipment, administration, and training, everything that's needed to maintain a fully equipped police service as legislated by the CSPA. It also covers costs for staff sergeant to inspector, supervision. Again, frontline staff is allocated by the base costs and the provincial responsibilities, which is the base services account for 50% roughly, and the provincial allocation 49%. Next up is the calls for service. And again, this is estimated at $208 million, and it's allocated on a proportionate share of calls for service activity within your municipality. Again, these calls are reactive calls for service. So they're seen as services that require a police to attend or investigate. So again, your assault or fraud, motor vehicle collision, missing persons, family or domestic disputes. There's over 500 billable calls for service. However, you will only see the calls for service that happen in your municipality in your statement. And the calls for service allocation, again, it's affected by the weighted time standards and the 4-year average calls for service data. We're going to get more into this specifically, but again, your calls for service are basically taken over a 4-year average, and that is to prevent steep inclines in costing. The base services cost and the calls for service costs make up 89% of this $497 million recovery. The other costs being our ODOEs, court security enhancements, overtime, prisoner transportation, accommodation, and cleaning are estimated at $53 million, and again are allocated by usage and service agreements. So this includes per property fixed costs for prisoner transportation. So each property has to pay $1.67, and accommodation and cleaning services at $5.70 per property if the municipality does not provide detachment with cleaning services. Okay. Next slide, please. So I want to bring attention to page 1. Now, again, I did distribute some bills for you to follow along with. This is the generic information, but if you want to apply it to the bill that you see in front of you, that may provide you some insight and perhaps some questions that you have. So again, this is page 1 of your annual billing statement. And you're going to see the breakdown for the costing of base services, calls for services, and other costs. Again, these have been color coordinated to match the pyramid picture that we saw before. So the orange box at the top there is your base service costs. And the blue box is your calls for service cost. And in green are the ODOE costs. Again, we mentioned for each municipality, so in this example here, in the orange box, there's 17,751 properties. And then when multiplied by the base service cost being $189.44, that's how the $3.3 million is calculated. So on your bill, you should be able to see your number of municipalities on page 1, and then the cost being $189.44. That's how the cost is determined for your base service. In the calls for service example, again here, the cost, there's a provincial total of $209 million. And in this example, 0.9338% is the total percentage that they have to pay for. That's their usage of the calls for service. And that's how we calculate the $1.9 million. Again, I will be going into more detail on the calls for services. This is just the overview. For the overtime, again, in this example, as you see, it's estimated at $165,354. Contract enhancements. So if your municipality has a Section 17 agreement, which no municipalities here do have, that's again above and beyond additional policing services, which I will talk a bit more later. For this example, they incur $214,038. Court security costs. Your municipality will only be charged for court security costs if you house the municipal courthouse. In this example, again, they are charged $263,586. Prisoner transportation fee, $29,644. Again, $17,751 times your $1.67 per property gets you to that cost. And then in this example, again, accommodation and cleaning services come to $101,181. So the total estimate cost is comes to $6,920,755. And then broken down for per property cost, that'd be $343.23 per property. As you know, again, these are cost estimates. So you'll see your year-end adjustment. So from 2023, the estimate didn't actually, it didn't meet the actual occurred costs. And this municipality has to pay an additional $214,976 to match the change in the estimate versus the actual. Last year, the government, there was rationale for this, as you know, the wage increases that affected that, and a discount was applied. So you will see that on your bill. We didn't put it on the general one, which I should have. So there was a discount applied, as you'll see on your bill. And again, this is how we come to the grand totaling, and then also broken down in a monthly billing amount for the municipality. So again, this is just the high level overview, but at this time, are there any questions that I can clarify if we need it?
So Member Burton first and then Member Danielson.
Thank you. The base service is households. And I'm kind of unique in Highlands East because I'm divided with Eastern and Central police services. Am I getting a double whammy here? I guess is the question I'd ask for, because half of my population are being serviced by Eastern Division.
I don't understand what's Eastern Division, like a municipal? Oh, region?
Region, sorry.
No, so what happens is an impact, this isn't your total, the only service, the only household property counts, so the household, commercial, industrial, are within the region, within the zone that falls under the municipality who's receiving that bill. So if your bill, if the municipality has half of it covered by Bancroft or a different, it's going to go to that bill. So you're not getting double whammied. It's
Okay.
not double tapped.
Thank
And again, that's why we go through that specific impact data, and it's by postal code. I've seen some sides of the street, actually. Some of them fall under a municipal police service, and the other side of the street falls under OPP. It's that specific that they divide it.
Thank you.
I've got the same situation as Warden Burton when it comes to being served by two different detachments, one from Muskoka and one from Haliburton. My question about the cost per household, and this is something that Haliburton County has made significant arguments about in the past, when the billing formula was changed, is that although the bill is X amount of dollars per household, we're unique in that half of our households are seasonal. And they don't require the same level, I don't believe they require the same level of service, and yet there's been no adjustment made with respect to what's required for service. No, I mean, MPAC knows exactly how many seasonal versus permanent residences there are in the county, and I just don't quite understand why they're all billed at the same amount.
Thank you for sharing that. So I can share with you, again, we administer what the numbers are. We do it to legislation. However, the ministry is currently undergoing a review based on last year's situation where there was a large discount given. They've committed to reviewing the OPP billing model as per legislation. So there is a website, which I'm happy to provide to you after. We just sent it to a different municipality as well, where they're looking for your input, and they're looking to have this, issues that have arisen with the current existing legislation to apply the regulation. It's 413/23, specific on the OREG. If you want to see how they include those counts, that's where we look to. So can I follow up with you and give you that information to follow up with the ministry? Because again, the OPP does not determine that. We don't have a say. We only administer what the regulation is. So I can't really offer you.
We made some significant arguments about this issue in the past, and it was completely ignored. So I would like to put my faith in the review that's taking place that will be considered.
Yep.
Because, residents where you've got people in place for 2 months of the year or maybe 3 months of the year compared to 12 months of the year, to me is considerably different.
Mhm.
We have a question from Member Carter, and I'll have to watch for Blake at the back, our IT support. We have one member joining us online, and we can't see him right now. So if you can just let us know if Member McKechnie puts his hand up. Thank you.
To build on the statement from not sure what you call you, Deputy Warden, Mayor, Member
Liz?
Liz. So just to give you some idea of what that means to us, because from time to time, maybe, somebody from the provincial government will consult with you also. So looking at our particular situation in Minden, we have over 7,000 properties. We have fewer population than 7,000. So everybody in Minden has more than one house, according to this regulation. And the base services, which make up about 62% of our bill, if you take our calls for service, let us say our calls for service was kind of the proxy for the population and the usage and so on. Our base service is at something like 72% higher than our calls for service. So we get a situation where I assume that a lot of the detachment resources are based on need, which is, calls for service and so on. So in fact, in our base service, we're paying for more service than we are actually A, getting, and B, even having the potential to get, because of the way the models are going to have to work. The numbers are huge for us. I mean, you are our largest single supplier in the municipality, and so at $2 million, it's a lot of money, and this would make a significant change. And I know the arguments were made in the past, and perhaps the provincial government at the time was less likely to look at blue ridings. But this is something that really needs to be addressed, because we cannot continue to support this type of a situation. Your costs go up every year, but that immediately comes to us. And our population being an elderly population, hence probably the less calls for service, because they're not quite as active. And but that also means that many are on fixed income or on lower incomes, and our ability to continue to pay this and on an unfair model is not something that is sustainable. I know it's not yours, you just apply the law, but those are some of the the quick numbers, and it's not a minor thing, it's big.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for sharing that. You're right. We don't have a personal say. However, I will say it is a little bit of a mind shift, because we don't run the organization like a business person, a traditional business, right? We recover costs.
Yeah.
We don't make profit from providing policing. It's an essential service that's needed. And, you have to be prepared. And the service that we provide, when it's needed, it's there, it's readily available. And it's one of those things, it is a big bill to pay, but it's an essential. And again, I'm happy that this review is ongoing, because this is very timely. You're right. A lot of municipalities were very unable to sustain that increase that happened last year. There was a lot of people came forward, municipalities came forward saying this. And this is why the government is, again, doing this review. They've committed to that, to come up with an adjustment. Again, OPP doesn't have that direct say, but we definitely do convey when we get these questions, when we get emails that ask us, who can we direct this to? We send it up to the ministry for sure. So this will be conveyed as well. But again, I really encourage you to also connect. There's actually a dedicated person, which I was really happy to see, because usually it's just a box, right? Like, send us an email, give us a call. But there's a person, Sheena, I believe is her first name, from the ministry, who's specifically allocated and dedicated to taking feedback and requests and issue with the bill and the billing model. So I really encourage as well.
Is that Solicitor General?
Yes, it's under Solgen. And again, I do have that specific information that I will leave and
Please.
provide to who should I send it to? Can I send, okay, is it Pam or Sue?
Sue.
Sue, wonderful, thank you. I will follow up with you, Sue, with that.
And we also do have a question from member McKechnie online. Walt, if you can hear us, go ahead.
No, I didn't have a question, but Needless to say, all the concerns of the other municipalities, Dysart has the same concerns.
Thanks,
Did you
Walt.
hear me?
Yep, thank you for that, and we'll make sure that the link to that Solicitor General website or person is provided to the members of the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Seeing none, we'll continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. And actually, Blake, is it? Can I get you to just, for the sake of seeing how this costs, I want you to scroll to slide 19 for me. Just fast forward to 19. Slide 19 at the very end of the presentation, towards the end of the presentation. There we go. Oh, no, one back. One back. There we go. So this is page 3 of your annual billing statement. And again, every year, this is how we come up, how those costs are calculated that show, again, the base services, calls for services, ODOE on here. So every year, this is how all the numbers you can see are calculated. Again, we don't go over this in fine tooth, but it will also help shed some light and perhaps on how your municipality falls into that. And you can see how those costs are calculated and used for, again, the reconciliation, the adjustments that were done the 2 years prior. So this is the 2025 annual billing statement, and we have the 2023 calls for services and estimate reconciled in this bill. So for the 2026 annual billing statement, you're going to have the reconciled costs from the 2024 year. So it's always a year behind. Okay, thanks. Can you please return back? Thank you, Blake. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides. I'm going to try to contain myself. It's our calls for service, the billing summary. And again, as I mentioned, you're going to see all billable calls for service. So this is only the municipal recovered calls for services, not all of the calls that happened within your municipality. So all the calls for services are basically classified into one of 9 service billing working groups on the left. You see drug possession, drugs, operational 2, other criminal code violations, property crime violations, statutes and acts, traffic, violent crime, criminal code. And then you see your municipal totals along the bottom. You'll also see in the blue box above the calls for service count. And those are the numbers that correspond with each year in that 4-year period where those calls happened. On the bottom line, you see the provincial totals. And again, they correspond within each year. Now, on page 5 of your statement, you see all the provincial calls that happened over the 4-year period within each of those 9 service billing working groups. But because, again, I couldn't fit it all onto the slide, I just took the totals from the provincial. But you can actually see how your municipality stacks against the whole province over that 4-year span, which is, again, helps bring light to how we calculate things. So what you're going to see here, again, the calls for service count, it uses the 4-year average of the reconciled calls for service data, which is again multiplied by the current average time standard. And that's the orange box. And basically this time standard is the average time that it takes to investigate the call within each of those service billing working groups. Now, when I say the time to investigate, that includes everything from taking reports, attending court, doing all of the reports to justice whenever we seize drugs or items we have to return to justice. We have to let them know. We have to destroy things. We have to vault things. Those time standards are an average. So sometimes it's even more, and sometimes it's even less. As legislation changes, as our court mandates change, that's going to also affect the time, which is why we calculate that every year. And as you see, the calls accordingly. So drugs possession. So for one call that falls under the top drug possession service billing work group, it's an average of 5.9 hours for one call. Accordingly, the drugs, whenever we, again, are dealing with a CDSA or a drug investigation, 88.1 hours is the average time for one call for service that we continue. Operational, 3.9 hours for one, and we have operational 2 at 1.7. Now, the calls for service that fall within each of these categories may not necessarily reflect the severity of the crime, we'll call it. It depends, again, they're categorized according to that average time standard. So again, if you want to have a look in your bill, if you look at from page 7, where the bill starts, thanks, Janet, you'll see all of those service billing work groups and all of those calls that fell within. And again, it may not make sense to you. Why are we putting, for example, under, use the operational one. That's usually a big one. So between operational 1, you're going to have things like, family dispute to a suspicious package, or trouble with youth, things like that. So it may not have a correlation in terms of how we investigate, but it has to do with that time standard, and that's how they're categorized. Okay. And again, you're only going to see the calls for service that happened in your municipality during that 4-year time span. If you go on our website, all of the available 562 UCR codes that the officers have to input to capture are available. So you can see every type of service call, billable service call, that is captured there. But again, you're only going to see what happens in your municipality. And again, you can compare how you stack with against the whole province as well on your bill on page 5. And again, like I mentioned, in this situation here, once we calculate the average time standard, the percentage of the total weighted time for the calls for service is allocated. That's where we take that time from for your service call. So in this situation, if you see the provincial totals line, when the 2025 average, the total weighted time for the whole province was 1,821,214 hours. So we calculated the whole provincial total of all those 9 service billing working groups, the municipality example above, their total weighted time from all their billable calls for service average comes to 17,007 hours. That's where you're going to take from that percentage from the 1.8 million hours. So in this example, there was 17,007 hours of total weighted time incurred for calls for service. Take it from the 1.8 million provincial total, it comes to 0.9338%. And again, from that total 209,489,000, and thank you. That's where that 0.9338% is taken to come to the amount of $1,956,280. So again, it's very transparent and clear how we get to that number. By using, again, that 4-year average, what's really important is, again, it prevents steep fluxes. Because if a municipality, I can share with you Woodstock Police Service, the Tory Stafford investigation, that took a lot of resources that went into that. That would have annihilated the municipal budget. They would not have been able to sustain that cost of that investigation. Obviously, the provincial police, the ministry has a responsibility to provide policing. And when a municipality cannot sustain it, the OPP shall step in unless directed otherwise by the government, by the ministry. So again, by having that 4-year average for each municipality, it does prevent steep fluxes in costing and provides a standard baseline that can be absorbed. I understand with the last year, again, due to the staffing and the wages increases, that's what also contributed to a significant cost increase, not necessarily just your calls for services that created that steep incline from last year. I just also want to mention every year our financial support unit, they're wonderful, small but mighty. There are analytics behind the DAR and the number crunching for, again, they apply the legislation to produce these bills. They host a webinar, and again, it's very detailed, it's very analytical. They go through the nitty-gritty, and usually it's held after the annual billing statements are distributed. This year it happened to fall in January, but traditionally it's usually in November or December. So again, I encourage you to reach out to your CAO, reach out to your treasurer if that's something of interest. you can join through them. It's not made available to the public, but again, it's to the municipalities that we provide who we have the agreement to policing with. And again, you are able to ask for that through your municipality. Again, and these webinars are also posted on our website. So if you're not able to join it live, it's translated and it's put on our website that any member of the public can listen to afterwards. So it is available too that way. Okay, were there any questions on this slide? Do I feel the enthusiasm? Okay, I'll turn it over to my colleague Janet.
Okay, so this next slide, switching gears a little bit, it's a bit of a snapshot from the last 5 years. And what it does, it shows the historical billing trends. And we see a slow but steady increase in the cost per property as well as total recoveries. Cost per property has increased from $348 on average, in 2024. My apologies. $347 in 2024 and $399 in 2025. There was a jump there. But this shows the value of the 4-year averages that Lisa spoke about. Sometimes there will be spikes in service, sometimes there will be dips and quieter times. The billing model helps hold things steady and avoid peaks and valleys to allow municipalities to budget properly and address those needs.
Just to shed light on that jump, one thing that I didn't mention on my slide was that basically when I talked about the reconciliation, under Bill 124, when FSU is calculating as per legislation, they are only allotted to allow for a 1% wage increase. As per legislation, the bill got overturned. So basically, what we saw that larger increase than normal was in 2023, it was actually 0.475% increase versus a 1%. And then in 2024, it's a 0.45%. It was a increase. So that's why that attributed to a larger bill based on that. Sorry.
That's important, an important point. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And next slide, please. So Lisa had mentioned that there's a lot of information that's publicly available to you, and it's on opp.ca. One great tool that's available to anyone who's curious in comparing the costs of their municipality to what they feel is a similar municipality, you can go on and look at our cost by municipality tool, select any municipality that is policed by the OPP, and you can see their property counts as well as their average cost per household. So if you're curious, you can go on to that website. You can look at the cost by municipality. There are also other great resources, those webinars that Lisa mentioned, and other billing information is available. So that's all publicly available. And I believe it goes back 2014. Yeah, so it goes back quite a ways. So if you're curious, looking for some evening reading, you can go in and you can look at that history. Thank you for that. And next slide, please. And so this is a slide about efficiencies. And when we come to these presentations, we often get asked, what is the OPP doing to help us? What are you doing to be more efficient and manage costs? And I'd just like to draw your attention to the crisis call diversion that is in the top left-hand corner. And for 2024, you see over 6,000 hours were redirected to frontline service. And crisis call diversion is when we embed a mental health and addiction crisis worker into a provincial communication center. The call diversion responds to calls involving individuals who might be experiencing a crisis event and who consent to speak to a crisis worker. This leverages the partnership between the OPP and a trained mental health and addictions crisis professional to de-escalate the situation and support individuals. It streamlines access to mental health crisis supports in non-emergent situations, and a crisis worker also helps reduce the number of unnecessary referrals to an emergency department. So that's one thing that the OPP has done to introduce efficiencies and redirect officers to priority calls on the front line. Another one I'll mention is the frontline support unit. The frontline support unit is represented under the one on the left in the middle, the green chart, if you will. A reduction through online reporting. And the frontline support unit program, it's a differential response strategy that focuses on call management. It's an online reporting portal, and it's a model that offers a call handling alternative. This helps us manage all assigned calls for service. It promotes efficient call management and investigative response strategies, maintains a high standard of data integrity and reporting, and it allows us to advance the program and grow it as required to maximize our call handling abilities. So these are a few things. I'll just touch on those too, but in this slide, there are a number of examples of efficiencies the OPP has found for frontline officers to redirect time to other frontline services. So I just wanted to highlight that in the presentation. Well, let's see here. I think over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Jana. So I want to talk more about the Community Safety Policing Act, and again, changes that have taken place since last year, 2024 April. So the big change really came, as you know, on April 1st, 2024, CSPA came in effect, and it basically ended the Police Services Act. It repealed it and replaced it. So prior, we had Section 10 contracts or a Section 5.1 non-contract arrangement, and now there's no differentiation. Everyone is just policed by the OPP. There's no distinction between the two. We have now Section 17, 22, and 14 agreements. And for especially the Section 17, that's the most appropriate. That's that traditionally we called it an enhancement, but now it's referred to as additional policing services, where municipalities can opt to apply and request a dedicated position for a special need within their municipality. And this position or this service has to go above and beyond adequate and effective policing. So if you want to ask for example, a general law enforcement officer, no, OPP has to provide that under legislation. So these positions are above and beyond adequate and effective. And right now we have a moratorium on officer positions, so no municipality can ask for a dedicated uniform position, but we can for civilians. And an example is at some detachments, some municipalities, they've asked for detachment operational clerks. And what this position is a dedicated civilian who partners with a platoon or a shift, and they are there working with them with the shift. So for example, if the front line, they apprehend someone, now they have to do a bail package or an investigation comes up, that operational clerk is going to be there to help fill the forms in. They're doing the administrative side of it that traditionally the officers have to do if they don't have that support. But again, it frees up that frontline availability, and it is more cost effective for that from that perspective, or as well as running collision reporting centers. Again, this is not something that happens everywhere, but in some municipalities, it's more cost effective to hire civilians who can run the collision reporting center. An officer will have to oversee it versus having an officer come off the road, complete a collision report as mandated, and then return back to frontline duties. It's more cost effective for, again, depending on the situation. We have the province, we have to meet the needs of smaller and urban larger centers. So that's something that we see used under the Section 17 agreements. The Section 22 refers to municipalities that fall within a region of municipal police force jurisdiction. So for example, Caledon, it falls under the region of Peel. Caledon has asked for a Section 22 agreement that gives permission for them to be policed by the OPP rather than the assigned jurisdiction. So some exemptions are made, but they have to be asked for that. Again, I don't think that would be appropriate out here, seeing that you're surrounded by OPP. So, and again, Section 14 agreements, due to the new legislation, whenever a police service, being the board or the chief of police, they can specifically ask for another police service to provide a mandated, adequate, and effective service. So for example, technical reconstruction. Whenever we have a benchmark traffic collision, we have specially designated and trained officers that have to perform those investigations. For perhaps a municipal service, if they don't have the large presence or the trained bodies, they can ask for a special agreement to be made where the OPP will commit to providing that service for them for a specific designated function that has to fall within adequate and effective policing. Same thing for public order unit. Smaller services can't afford to sustain that cost, so they make agreement with Toronto Police, Hamilton, Peel, OPP to have that service provided because it's legislated. They have to have it. So that's how they can make that arrangement. And that's new to under the CSPA. We didn't have that before. Detachment boards. I'm going to set a whole slide to that following this. Again, why you're here today. Formerly, we had our CPAC or we had our detachment, our police service boards within the OPP. No more. We only have detachment boards, OPP detachment boards. Changes to the code of conduct. I don't want to really, the changes really reflect the language that's used. The same, and then the process that we had as well. We fall under Inspectorate of Policing, they govern it. And as well, if there's a complaint, that process has changed, but it just falls under new wording, basically. We have new reporting requirements, which Staff Sergeant McClure is going to touch on with you after our meeting today for, again, police service OPP detachment boards and the reports, mandated annual reports, as well as the community safety wellbeing plans. As I mentioned, Inspectorate of Policing, they govern the OPP detachment boards, which include roles and responsibilities, training mandates, regulations. So they basically police the boards to make sure that they're actually meeting their provincial responsibilities and regulations, not the OPP. We've updated our standards and training, as mentioned before, in conjunction with the Auditor General's value for money audit. And under the legislation, a lot of, I don't want to say changes, but some updated changes in standards, but it's been very clarified for all policing, not just OPP, but for municipal services too. There's a little more distinction between what shall be provided and met, which is important. And we also have changes that focus on our First Nations, which again, I do have a slide, which I'll touch on to that. The next slide, please. So again, thank you all sincerely for stepping up and for taking on this role to be a part of the OPP Detachment Board. You are invaluable to your communities and your municipalities to bring forward what's important. So just to start off with, under our CSPA, OPP detachment boards versus a police service board don't share the liability or the responsibilities that a police service board must bear. And again, within a police service board, they focus on an individual policing service and they have more involvement, direct involvement in policy development, on reporting requirements, budgeting, again, in community representation. It's a different outset for police service boards and OPP detachment boards. And as you see under the CSPA, I believe it starts at section 67 and it runs to about section 73. You're going to see them, again, police services board and OPP detachment boards. And sometimes there is confusion when that's read in terms of what those roles and responsibilities are. And, you know, that's what we're here. We're here to help govern it, as well as we have police service advisors that are assigned that can also help us to navigate if there's any challenges or confusion with that. And again, within the detachment boards, your role is to also, again, bring forward what are the concerns, work collaboratively with your detachment commander, work collaboratively within your municipalities for that community safety wellbeing plan. Like I mentioned before, crime does not see jurisdictional boundaries. So this really does open up that sharing opportunity to hear what's happening within every community, and it impacts all of us. And, you know, a lot of the problems or challenges and issues that we see in policing are not necessarily a criminal standalone policing issue, right? We need involvement from all service sectors, EMS, fire, mental health services and crisis housing, all of those play a critical role in our community safety and well-being. So that's, again, really important role that you play to bring that forward and to advocate for that and make that meaningful contribution. In terms of reporting requirements, again, OPP detachment boards do not produce budgets. We don't, we're a no dicker sticker policing service. We provide the annual billing statement. It's a cost recovery. We don't run it like a business where municipal policing services, it's different. They have to budget for that. They provide those reporting, whereas OPP, police municipalities do not. Again, due to our model, right? We cost recover for municipal services. However, the provincial obligations are not costed to our municipalities that are policed by us. And again, the community representation, as you see from here today, we have some appointees, which is actually, this is the first meeting I've been to where we had appointees attend. A lot of the other OPP detachment boards are still struggling to fill those positions. So again, very grateful for you participating and stepping up and being leaders in your community. And we're going to talk about too representation from all municipalities and First Nations that are served. So that's something new. Again, I have been to a few detachment board meetings where we had First Nations attending, and that's the first time that's ever happened, which is really, I think it's important. Again, we're including everyone in that opportunity to be part of those conversations, that they're part of our communities and we're all policed. So again, I just want to touch on briefly other key functions that you serve as being part of your OPP detachment boards. You get to be involved in the consultative role as the detachment commander selection. And I see you did a good job here with Staff Sergeant McClure. Determine again objectives and priorities for the detachment in consultation with your detachment commander and aligning with the ministry strategic plan. So being again your community safety well-being plans. Again, and then the annual reports are due on or before June 30th. And again, we've been working with police service advisors. We understand there may be some, we'd like to make sure you hit that deadline, but if there is challenges with hitting that deadline, please reach out to the police service advisor, and I have that name and number, which we can consult on after if needed. Okay, next slide, please. So again, I'm going to just touch on CSPA for First Nations. Again, now a First Nations community, for example, Alderville First Nation, they sit on their police services board. They can ask or request to be a part of a board. They can voluntarily choose to participate in the community safety well-being plans. And as well, for First Nations officers, they've changed the language, and it actually appoints them as a First Nation officer, where it was a peace officer before, but their designation has changed as appropriate. And as well, the option to participate under the CSPA and the law enforcement complaints, so LECA, if they want to, complaints can be made and processed under LECA. Okay, next slide. And closing, this is my favorite slide as well. Wonderful resources listed on there. I've given you my name, my phone number. If there's something that comes up, and again, I will follow up for the ministry contact regarding input and complaints to the current OPP billing model. You have difficulty navigating our website, there is a lot of information on there. And like I said, I'm a bit of a geek, and I really do like that access to information. So happy to navigate. And again, if anything comes up or questions, support is needed, feel free to reach out either through your detachment commander or to me direct, as I'm in charge of Central Region. And on behalf of my colleague Janet today and Staff Sergeant McClure, thank you for having us. I'll take any other questions if there's any.
Thank you, Lisa. Just Member Carter.
So just, looking at the model, obviously, it's, the usage of services and so on is not going to be homogeneous across the province. There's going to be variability. But let's say that, over the next year or two, we really start to make investments in this whole Ring of Fire region, okay, which would require probably considerable policing. but there's virtually nobody who lives there. And particularly in these types of natural resource projects, it ends up being people who fly in or camp and so on. So there's not going to be a base to absorb all these extra costs. Does that mean so that means everybody will pick up that cost? So is there studies that are done on a routine basis to see if there are any disparities across the province, so that a particular focus can be put on the costs in one area, so that not everybody has to pay for problems in one area?
That's a very interesting observation and question in depth. So basically, right now, the OPP already polices unincorporated territories. And there are large areas of land where exactly what you described happens. Or we can look at municipalities where their population fluctuates due to evacuees attending their municipality for periods of time. A lot of services, not just policing, but all of their services go up, right? But basically, there is funding that can be applied for, where again, emergency funding can be provided for. I can speak to policing only that I'm aware of, to help offset those costs. So in terms of the development that's going to happen up north and the Ring of Fire, like you mentioned, and whether or not that's an unincorporated territory, Crown land, things like that, that's getting turned over, as well as First Nations, right? We know that's the forefront of that. So that falls under federal policing. So again, I don't know in terms of study that's going to be done to cost, I guess, if you will, that situation or that development that's anticipated. But again, it's no different than, or rather, it's similar to how municipalities are anticipating large growth. Urban planning, like I know in Springwater and Caledon, they're anticipating large developments of 30,000 houses, right? And they're trying to forecast how, what's going to happen? How are we going to cost for that? And again, our model is based on estimate. And as the populations grow or the housing grows, there's going to be a tax base that will come with that. And again, just because you have more houses doesn't mean you're going to have more policing problems, potentially. And we can't choose who gets to live in our communities or come visit our communities or travel through our communities. And that's why it's important we have a well-established and equipped policing service. So to answer your question, I don't know about research that goes into it from the ministry's end, but I suggest that's again, a very insightful mindset and observation that should be brought forward. And I think that a person we have dedicated to the OPP billing model, that's a wonderful thing to bring forward. And I'm going to reiterate that we'll talk about that at our team meeting, because that's never really thought about that. But again, we do account for unincorporated territory, so I do think there is some kind of a formula for that.
Other questions? I have a couple, but just open it to the floor first. Member Danielson.
You talked about individual municipalities being able to ask for specifically additional services. I'm wondering, because it's the lower tiers that get the billing, but if it was determined, for instance, by the county through conversations with the detachment commander that there is some challenges with staffing, and we deemed it to be important to look into adding additional, say, administrative support for them, is it possible for, say, the county to request that additional support on behalf of the 4 municipalities and just pass the billing on to the lower tiers, or how would that work?
So that's a great question. And to answer your question short, no, the county is not responsible, because we provide our contract for policing or our agreement for policing. It falls within each municipality, unless you fall under a county provision like Waterloo Regional County Police Service or Peel Regional Police Service. That's special designation through the ministry to have that county. So no, a county cannot make that request. And with these positions, so for example, in Nottawasaga Detachment, there's 3 municipalities. They each bear the full cost of these positions. And again, they're dedicated to above and beyond what's mandated. So they have special positions that are civilian dedicated, and their municipality shares that cost. It's divided again by the property counts, but that's something that each of the 3 municipalities have decided to do. prior, we used to have group contracts under Police Services Act. No more. There's no more group contract. There's no more Section 10 or 5.1s. Everyone's their own municipality. And if you want to collaborate with, say, being under the detachment, it would be kind of hard. I've never done a Section 17 agreement for, say, 2 municipalities only out of 4 that are incorporated in a detachment. Usually it has to be shared,
But
right?
if I can, Lisa, that really then becomes the role of the board representing the entire county. We have representation in each municipality. If the board, in collaboration with the detachment commander, was to say, we think we need this, or we think we need that, and there was an agreement to it, then the representatives of each of those municipalities agree as part of this board then to say, okay, we share that cost.
And
Is
will they
that
have to
not the
take it
intent?
to their, that's the intent.
They
but
would have to then
take
take it to
the
their municipalities for approval.
And the municipalities would be who we bear that contract with.
Correct.
Right? So even with staffing, with, deployment of staffing, that falls under the OPP purview, under the detachment commander, regional consultation. That's not something that an OPP detachment board would have privy to determine or to say, we think you should be deploying here or here. No, it comes under strategic analytical deployment, under strategy. We need to make sure, have your constituents, are they reporting things that are happening? It's not helpful. I've been in situations where we attend these wonderful meetings and delegates are here and they tell me about, well, we had all of these traffic complaints happening, and this is the first time, a month later, it's being brought forward in these meetings, which it should be, but they haven't been reported. So, it's really important to, again, just convey that message. Yes, you are the conduits, absolutely. And you have that relationship between the municipalities as well as the detachment commander. So yeah, that is something that can be shared, but it falls under the actual contract itself will fall within the municipalities, not the OPP detachment board, but I definitely recommend and make suggestion.
Member Chevadukas.
Quick question. So if the county agrees, and I'm gonna give you a what if situation, calls for service are starting to go up. I'm just gonna add a little more. We have a lot of people that are starting to move into Haliburton. The population is increasing. So your manpower is probably, or should start increasing. Who does the county speak to from the OPP or from wherever to say, okay, we need an extra, argument's sake, 5 extra officers that are going to be part of this detachment? How does that work?
Well, just to have deployment, again, there's a formula that we look at. We have a service delivery model. And right now we're under a 7-year program, if you will, where, again, due to the changes under the legislation, we've recognized our staffing has to change. We have to increase it. And it's a challenge for the whole province, as you know, to retain good potential officers. We are recruiting, looking for civilian and or uniform members. If you know good people, send them to the OPP. But again, there is an actual deployment model that we follow, and it looks at a whole bunch of variables, not just population growth. Crime severity is definitely important because you can have a situation with a municipality of 6,000 people and the calls for service are quadruple what you'll see here between all 4 municipalities, right? Again, based population, like you'd mentioned. So again, we don't share that staffing number per se. It's not the board's responsibility. Luckily, really, you don't bear that liability. Whereas a municipal police service board, they are involved when officers are off on sick leave, on training, things like that. Whereas the OPP, we have different pool of resources to mandate. But again, if you feel the need, it'd be important to know why. Like the calls for service have to report it, and there is a model in place that take a whole bunch of variables. Staff, did you want to comment on that as well? Is there anything you want to add?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, they're constantly reviewing the service delivery model all the time, and things are always changing. And I can tell you, even coming from a previous detachment, they're always trying to get those extra bodies out there once the numbers are kind of backing it, sort of thing.
And they take into consideration too, officers that are deployed, gone on temporary assignments. As you know, for us, it's nothing new to go on we call it a TA or a TAA for developmental opportunities, but we bring that wealth of knowledge back. So there is movement, and we can't tell an officer, you have to remain here now that you're trained up, you have to stay here. That's one of the perks of being with the OPP. They can choose to move for family, personal opportunity for their careers, things like that. So it is a little bit different.
I didn't mean to complicate it. I just wanted to say, all right, if the county needed, or sorry, if the county said, listen, we may need an extra 5 people, who do we approach and I understand it goes by what you were just telling me that
Analytics.
about the process. I understand that, but I was just trying to find out who gets approached so that we can say, all right, or the county can say, listen, this is what we would like to do.
I suggest the detachment commander is
Okay.
definitely the chain of command to follow.
Well, I figured since you were here, I'd ask you.
Yeah,
Or out of it.
that's wonderful. Nope, definitely you'll be in good hands with Staff Sergeant McClure.
Just a couple of quick questions if I can. So you've touched on the DARS, the daily reporting. That's a manual process, correct? The officers input
Nope.
their information at the end of the day as to where they spent their activity, or like, again, would do it by the computer, but it's at their discretion as opposed to a records management process that says they spent so many hours or electronic reporting. How does that not
So-
get skewed? I guess.
So
is
what
what I'm-
happens is when we get the call for service, actually dispatch now too, we do have some automated processes that will basically determine it. But as you know, sometimes when we get a call, we're told one thing, we show up, it's not that call. It's not that service that's provided. It's not that location that we need to attend to. So at that point, again, the officers have to go in and change, or again, it's not very cumbersome. It is very easy to do. And we have 2 streams. Again, we have the automated one that happens when we're dispatched, as well as the officer who will change. We use buttons to indicate, or again, they're all linked to technology to say, yep, I'm clearing a call, I'm attending a call. That helps capture it too, which saves time basically. And again, it's overseen by the platoon sergeants as well. Our end, the financial support unit, constantly doing reviews in the reconciliation and monthly. So if they see something that's like kind of unusual, because again, this is their world. All of a sudden, they see all these calls for services are happening in this one area, and they see the numbers up, the hours are up. They'll reach out. They'll be like, "Is this accurate? What's happening there?" And sometimes we've learned, it was a coding error or there was a glitch with the computer system. But again, great integrity checks go into that system. It's not just a one and done.
And similarly, you may have already answered this then, the ODOE, how's that percentage calculated, for example, for IT services or communication services, those sort of things? Is it a percentage based on the number of calls, or is it a percentage based on the resources that are applied here, or how does that?
I'm going to talk about the accommodations and cleaning because I just recently dealt with that. So what I learned is all of the municipalities that don't provide a detachment building and cleaning. So for the whole province, all of the, because the ministry has to provide it, right? So if a municipality chooses to serve that, they absorb those costs, and that charge isn't billed to the municipality. And instead they recover some money with a contract with Infrastructure Ontario. So it is kind of a business opportunity, if you will. The second part of it is if you don't provide it and you're charged that amount, all of the cleaning bills for all of Ontario are every year calculated, and that's what's distributed. It's divided amongst those households that
Okay.
don't have, that don't provide the detachment and cleaning. So that's how we count for that amount. Again, it is a provincial model. But do you want to talk on the IT? Because there's a lot that goes into that, like with licensing, numbers of computers. It's a whole challenge.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah, the IT support, the different applications and that sort of thing. So the way we account for that is by building it into base services. And that amount is built in, you see on page, 3 of this bill, where we summarize the provincial costs, and it gets broken down into base and calls for service. So those IT costs are built in, and then for the base cost, it's applied per property across the province. So I think it's $189.44 per property. That includes the IT portion and those other little portions as well for equipment, weapons, vehicles, that sort of thing.
All right. So similarly, just looking at that page 3 of the billing statement, so it refers to the uniform members, for example, and very specific as to whether you have an inspector, whether you have a staff sergeant. is the billing done based on actual? Or is it done based on, we could have, for example, 50 officers assigned to this detachment, but only 45 of them are currently working because 5 are off on other leaves or 5 are, disabilities or one thing or another. So that's then picked up by overtime to cover the costs. So then we almost get double billed. Do you understand where I'm going? Like, so how do they capture actual versus documented?
So the bill you're provided with, it's an estimate. So that's a forecast. And then it's reconciled 2 years later in the next bill. So 2023, you see the reconciliation in 2025, and that's where the reconciliation is made. Lisa, do you have anything further to that?
Yes, and again, when officers are on leave, for example, you're not being billed when they're on leave. That's a debt. They're taken out. It is some cost is absorbed through the provincial the base services cost. However, I know there is specific formula that goes into that. So again, when we have a call for service, it's as many officers as we need, right? Every
Yeah.
call for service isn't a 1 or a 2. If we need 20, 20 are going. If you need 2, 2 are going. If you need 1, you get 1. Like, we don't distinguish between the numbers. So when we do have to backfill for officers that are on leave or on training, things like that, a portion of that overtime is pooled and it's covered through the base service. But again, when officers are on sick leave, there is a formula, like Janet had mentioned, because it's reconciled, those costs are taken out.
Okay, and similarly, if I can just sort of building off of that, for those other provincial assets that are required, I think you referred to MCerts and things like that, because that's a provincial entity.
Yeah.
That doesn't come into our direct billing, or is that a base cost that is then percentage out? And similarly, say we have a large, I look at the chart and it talks about drug possession versus drug trafficking. There's obviously a higher weighted cost to the drug trafficking investigations than there are to drug possession ones. But then we may have one street crime member doing that investigation here versus an entire OPP drug unit that comes into the area to pursue that investigation. How does that work from a billing perspective? Do we get billed for the provincial entity coming in, or should our people just say, send it to the provincial unit and have them pick it up under provincial dollars?
That's a great question. So we don't, again, there is mandate required. We can't just it'd be like doing a section 14 within our own service to say, okay, we're not going to do the big ones. No. Again, you are not billed for the provincial resources. So when we do organized crime investigations, that's a provincial tab. They pick up the tab on that. We may deploy officers on temporary assignment to those projects, that their pay essentially now falls under the provincial obligation. So again, like we mentioned, the reconciliation that takes place, that's accounted for when we're on training, temporary assignments, things like that. And again, there is mandate to be using the CIB. There's requirements, but again, we always consult. And if it's going to be, it just depends on the investigation. So I don't know if did you want to comment on that stuff, or is it it's the same mindset, right? Like, how would your members be deployed, right? Did they call, you're obviously involved with supervisors?
Yeah, like here locally, and if we're having other members, like I can't speak to the billing, but you're right, like if we're calling in ERT and stuff and I need to deploy my officers, they're gonna go. I'd likely, depending if I had to neighbor, like help out Huntsville or something as well, I'm gonna be backfilling it with overtime though. And so some of that can even, from what I understand, get billed back to provincially as well, especially if it's for one of those bigger investigations.
Perfect. I think Member Hodgson has a question, and then Member
Yeah.
Carter. Oh, sorry.
One other thing to add, if I may, when that occurs, and the call comes in and then service needs to expand to meet the needs of that call, that's one call for service, regardless of how many provincial resources are required to support it. So it's one initial call for service, and then that will open up all the other resources behind it that we do not cost recover for. Does that help? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of getting in the weeds again. Two things. WSIB, is that considered when you say when officers are off? Do we get charged in WSIB?
No, you do not, but that's correct.
Okay, and the number of officers and allocation of officers. So we have a certain number we're allocated per shift in its most basic form. new officers, can they go on their own? Are they charged the same? You know, you have a new officer, they have to be paired with a senior officer. I don't know the exact terms,
Yeah.
but do we get charged for that officer that can't go on their own to a call? Do we get charged the same as other officers?
So you're not charged on an FTE based model. You're charged by, again, policing services, cost recovery. So we don't charge, again, when you need a call for service, you can have one, or you can have 20, or you could have 10, you could have two. It's one call for service. You're not billed like in a municipality model or we say a full-time equivalent position-based model. Now, new municipalities that come to the OPP, they are charged on an FTE based model as they transition to the OPP for 3 years. And the reason for that is we don't have the calls for service data. Remember how you have that 4-year call for service average? So until that new municipality that's come to the OPP can account for that three plus years of average of data, then they can enter into the billing model. So before that, they're charged on a per call or per officer based model. But once you're in, you're in.
Member Carter.
So two-part question here. So, you know, in areas such as, like, to say the Wasaga Beach and so on, where every weekend you have to bring in extra officers for the crowd control, shall we say, that occurs on weekends in the summer. That's scenario one. Scenario two is we just had a disaster. So we had an ice storm. We had to bring in extra folks. So how are those billed? And depending on your answer, there could be a follow-up.
Well, again, great question. So whenever you have that population influx, again, planning, coordinating goes. Wasaga Beach is something annually. We know the summer months, it is the population just swells, as some of these smaller communities too, municipalities as well, right? You have the cottagers that come back, your population increases. So during that time, calls for service may likely increase as well. So in the case of Wasaga Beach, because they know that's historical traditional, you're right, overtime shifts are provided to cover for that. And the municipality does receive, I believe they can apply for special funding or grants if it's an emergency. But if not, they have to absorb that. That's part of their tax base, if you will. Businesses make money. You know, people that come through, again, we can't choose who gets to come in and out of our municipalities, but that's something how that's sustained, but they know it's going to go. Whereas when you have a special event like Boots and Hearts, for that weekend, the population increases to about 60,000 people plus. And again, that's a one-off. And we do a lot of preparatory with the private stakeholder that runs it. They have to pay for paid duties.
Right.
They have to pay for those services that are above and beyond to meet that need. But we still provide provincial resources to that.
Okay, disasters then.
Disasters, yeah. Well, it's a provincial response, right? So again, if it falls under the obligation of our specialty, you're not billed for that. The province takes the bill on that. And even the part of the overtime that's incurred, again, it depends on what it's related to and the type of call for service that, again, you only receive a portion of that overtime. You won't receive the full bill on it if it's applicable.
Because if it is declared a disaster, we are allowed to apply for funding.
Right.
Okay, so it would be good to know is if there's going to be another bill or an increased tab from the OPP that we would like to apply for the funding to pay for that. We can, because any overtime or any use of staff is something that's eligible for a refund.
For sure. And again, when I mentioned about those DARs being done, our team and financial support unit, they look at the overtime that's incurred and what the officer has scored that to. So again, if it's a billable call for service investigation and that officer's deployed from Huntsville or from Aurelia to come assist, again, they still have to do their 12-hour shift because they're on duty. But now if they roll into the overtime portion of it, that municipality will pay that portion related to that billable call for service investigation that's running. So there's not going to be a dedicated, if they say they show up for provincial highways closed down, right? All the trees were on the roadway. That's a provincial obligation. So you're not going to be billed for that.
Even if it's not on provincial highways?
If it's the provincial highway, that's right.
No, but if
a
it's not provincial highway, we have county roads, we have town roads.
Well, with that, again, I think it falls under, it's still probably the provincial obligation of that because of the nature of the call.
Okay.
I have a question there, please. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Seem to have lost me. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, am I lost there? I'm not hearing anything.
No, you're still connected. You're no longer active. Our computer just died here, so just about 5 minutes. I'll get you guys back up.
Yeah,
Just don't leave the meeting.
and I had a question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'll get you back up, and they were just coming to your question there.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. Well,
So-
I'll give you a call when we're back up.
Can anybody hear me there?
Walt, are you online?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, we're coming back in 1 minute, Walt. We'll open it up for your question at that time.
Yeah, no problem.
So clearly the chair has lost control because the 10:45 turned into 10:55. So, but we will try and reconvene the meeting at 10:53. And although we've received a motion to accept the presentation, Member McKechnie was unable due to technical issues, so he does have a quick question. So I'll turn it over to you, Walt, for your question of the dignitaries.
Okay, you can hear me then?
We can hear you now.
Okay. My question is like, I've always, been concerned about, all our villages like Haliburton, Minden, and police presence, which is to me is very important. And I understand, the shortage of police. But another thing that's really bothers me, and I know that it's not the police's fault, but we sit here and we talk so much about crime and hours and overtime and different all the different jobs that the police do in our community. But to me, like we don't talk about our youth enough. And I know that all the people around this table here and our committee and you're doing a great job and the police do a great job. But I just think that our youth need a presence in the schools. And I don't know how you could do that. That's needless to say, that's the higher ups. But I mean, look at the problem we have with drugs in our community. Every community has it. And I'm not saying that you're not doing a great job. You're not trying to do it, but I think your hands are almost tied. But I just think that, I mean, adults today have so much respect for police. If you get a speeding ticket or a drunk driving charge, your insurance is like another mortgage payment. But I think our youth today, they have to, gain some more respect for the police. I think presence is such an important thing, educating them on the pitfalls of drugs. And I mean, I could go on, but I'm just going to shut up. I think I made my point. I don't know how we're going to solve this. Needless to say, the monster's out of the cage, and I don't know how we get it back in. But the police, to me, have such a big part of our communities. Not that they can solve every problem, but your presence to me is very important. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Walt, and I'll turn it over to our panel. But first, I just, from a billing perspective, I'll ask that our panelists speak to the proactive versus reactive side, because the calls for service is what the billing happens. The proactive time, if the officers are out of their cars, Deb, and they're in the schools, that may or may not generate a call for service, or would they track that as by way of a call for service? So that'd be the first part. And then the second one, maybe you might be aware of it, Deb, but the legislative change around school resource officers just recently, this past week or so. So now maybe the legislation allows us to get the officers back into the school, whereas in the past, they necessarily weren't as there.
Yeah, so I can say that for certain, and Lisa touched on it with our service delivery model and kind of the DAR codes and stuff. So there is a portion of that. It's kind of like a badge. And I think actually, did you include it in your report maybe? Okay, so it's a badge and there's percentages as to what we would like to see our officers doing. Again, you never know. Policing is, as we know at this table, very different from day to day. But there is a community service portion for that we would like to see our officers engaging in. As I agree with you, Walt, very near and dear to my heart as well, for our officers to be out there. So yes, they do generate a call. If they go out on foot patrol or if they're out in the schools, we generate that as a community service call, unless it's a specific call. Like if it's a drug call within the schools, it will still come in as a drug call and it'll be tracked that way. If it's just the guys getting out and doing foot patrol downtown Minden or even just going into the school, that'll be a community service call per se. I agree with you. I was just about to say the SRO program, unfortunate that was removed years ago and stuff, but it is coming back. The balance is going to be that whole, we're a smaller detachment compared to other detachments around the province. And it's going to be that whole balance of, again, trying to engage the officers to get out there, whereas you may in Aurelia actually be able to have a specific officer that's their role, right? And I don't know if we'll get to that stage immediately here. I mean, hopefully, because I would agree that the youth is important. And I mean, this is a whole other off-topic type thing, but recruitment and doing recruitment nights for our youth and that kind of thing is something that I did where I came from, and I really want to bring that here. So that's a whole other issue. But again, kind of going on that topic, I agree we need to touch more of the youth. So I'm hoping that we can engage more within the schools. But I think it's just going to take time with that new legislation and stuff as well.
Thanks, Deb. Another follow-up question does that answer your question, Walt? You're on mute again, I think. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, got you now.
Okay, like I appreciate that answer, and of course I know your hands are tied in a way, but I just think that if it was once a month or whatever, that it was part of the education system, that police officer in his uniform was there educated, trying to educate the kids on the pitfalls of getting involved in drugs would be so important. But needless to say, I know it's way above me and all of us here. That'd probably have to be started at a higher level. So, but I just think it's so important. Like we have so many problems, and our youth are precious. The ones who are coming up behind us all, and we got to stop this monster that's in the schools, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
I would agree with that as well. And I mean, there are things, and when I go over the report and show a little presentation and stuff, our current MCERT officer, who's also our CEO, so our community engagement officer, he is in the school quite a lot. Actually, he just did a presentation at the Archie School there last week, I believe it was. So he is engaged in the school as well. But yeah, obviously the more the better. I couldn't agree more with you for the educational pieces and stuff. And you know, I think I chatted with the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee as well a little bit about some of these things and doing some educational nights as well, like even in the evening, and kind of trying to have those groups come together for that stuff as well. Lisa just mentioned the one thing, which the calls for service. So any of these proactive things, the community engagement pieces, they are not billed, is what she's confirming. So I'll let her speak to that.
Yeah, so whenever it's a proactive measure, again, a portion of that may fall into the provincial base service cost. It's not a direct bill for a call for service to your municipality. You won't see that as a billable call for service on that list of 530 engaging in the school or school presentations. That's not a billable call for service. That's proactive. And that's picked up usually by the provincial tab.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. That helps. Member Danielson, I think you have one follow-up question.
Just on Walt's concerns about the schools and the greater need for presence in the schools, and I'm really glad to hear that, you know, you've got officers working on that. But I had heard in the last few months that there's been pushback from the schools that they don't want police officers there because they feel intimidated somehow. I was shocked to hear that, because out of all the things that we want our kids to hear are all the good things that the police do for us, and to hear that they were not necessarily welcome by whatever the school boards, or I'm not sure where the pushback was coming from, but
I know, Liz, that has been the case previously with some school boards around the province, Toronto District School Board, I know some others, but that has been reversed, and now they've opened that up again to allow that level of engagement. I think it's still going to come down to the conversation between the detachment and the local school itself or the board to say, you know, to what level. I think Deb touched on it. The school resource officer program is a specific program that officers are trained in to go into the school and that sort of thing. But there's other ways for an engagement officer, is what Deb's talked about, to get into the schools and have that connectivity with the students.
good to hear. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for all the questions, and thank you to our presenters. I did mention to Janet, Lisa, that you're, again, welcome to stick around if you'd like to. You don't have to by any means. I know you've got busy schedules, so we do appreciate the time you're taking out of your schedule today, and we'll move on with our meeting. And again, if you need to slide out and head on your way back to Ray, we completely understand. So thank you.
Thank you so much again on behalf of Janet and I. And again, I will look forward to following up with Sue with that information. And again, be in touch if you need anything. Thank you again for serving your communities. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on with our agenda, looking at our items of business. 7.1 is in your package for our group insurance. At our last meeting, we talked about the group insurance requiring an abuse policy. So I'll turn it over to Sue. She's done a fair bit of work in the background and provided us with a draft today, and we can then speak to that as a board.
Thank you for that. So yes, coming forward from a previous meeting in which the board moved to pursue a group insurance option when renewing board insurance this fall, we have before you a draft abuse policy that is a requirement for our board. Staff worked on this review with the county's HR manager, thanking her for that. And while the insurance agent cannot comment on the policy's subject matter, they have confirmed it will meet the insurance program requirements. It is presented here for discussion. I know there are some amendments that we can make, and happy to hear from the board any further amendments or discussion.
Thanks, Sue. So I'll open it up to the board members for any comments, questions, points of clarity from Sue. I did chat with Sue just beforehand, and I appreciate that it was a county document, and we took it from Lanark County and another board. I do have a couple of reworks, but again, I'm happy if the board wants to approve it as a draft policy at this time, and then I can work with Sue over the next month to tweak some of there's areas in it where it speaks to duplication service. For example, the WSIB, if an investigation commences, it speaks to it twice within the document. So just a little bit of wordsmithing and tidy up that I can, with the board's approval, and then either bring back the final document at our next meeting. But again, thanks Sue for her work on this. I think unless there's any other questions or comments, I'm happy to receive a motion to accept it as a draft policy. Member Carter, Member Burton, all in favor? Approved. Thank you very much. And thanks, Sue, again for your work on this one. And oh, sorry, I need to get Member Burton, sorry.
So moved by Member Carter and seconded by Member Burton that the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board Policy 1-2025, Abuse, Violence, Harassment Policy be received as a draft policy. That's a lot of policies.
All in favor? Thank you. Approved. All right. 7.2. Again, just following up on our discussions at our last meeting around a draft budget. For clarity, having heard the presentation this morning, this is the budget of the board, not the detachment budget, but the budget of this board as paid for by the municipality, shared resources by the through the county. Between last month and this month, I prepared a draft budget that I sent along to Pam, Sue, and Member Carter, who offered to sit on the subcommittee for this. You have that in front of you, and just a couple of notes that I provided below, and then a couple of explanations, if I can, on some of the updated information I received. So everybody's had a chance to review it. Just a note on the legal and professional fees. We had looked at allocating $10,000, and I remember Carter, you had looked at maybe we should increase that. In discussions with the CAO, what I was unaware of is that the county does hold a legal contingency fund that we could tap into should the board need support. What the intent of this legal and professional fees budget line would be for us to consult with legal counsel outside of the county. But if it then involved a large human rights tribunal or a large legal matter or an investigation of such, we would then be able to tap into the county's reserve for that. So given that, I'm satisfied that we could actually even reduce this number from 10,000 down to say 5,000 to keep our budget in line. But it does give us that at least some funding to allow for us to engage with legal counsel to support the board. We also have insurance, which again supports the board as an entity. And should we get into a large legal battle, we could tap into our insurance. Member Shevadukas?
I'm just going to suggest that we leave it at 10. And that's saying we've got it there. We don't have to use it. If you disagree with me, say so. But knowing the cost of legal costs nowadays are crazy. You drop it down to 5 and now you gotta go back to beg for more instead of having 10. We don't have to use the whole 10. That's my point.
Again, it's open for discussion. That's why we have it on the floor today. The other one is, and we can approve it in whole at the end, but the other one is the travel, meals and allowances. Just looking at some of the other, so it's the rate is 74 cents per kilometer for any travel costs. I'm not so sure $500 is going to go very far for us if we have to travel. For example, the most recent conference that the OAPSP held was in London. So if we were traveling from here to London and back again and getting a travel allowance, I'm not so sure that it would cover that. So just on that, if any other comments or thoughts, whether that should be, what I was looking at was whether that could be reversed with the office and supplies. Because again, conversation with Sue is that our office supplies are provided by the county. It was just if we were above and beyond what is normally provided by the county. So what I was going to propose is that we reverse the two and bring our travels and meals and allowances up to 1,000 and take the office supplies down to 500, just to reverse the two numbers. But remember,
And I'm fine with that. I was just gonna more or less suggest that. I was gonna certainly double it anyway.
and again, I'm open to the board's comments if we even need the office supplies and materials. But Sue, I think if we need if there was something that was outside of what the county would provide, licensing costs or things like that, that wouldn't be provided. Member Carter.
Well, at some point we might need personalized stationery or something. So, but the legal fees, again, this is new. So we don't know what it is that we are going to be asked to look into. So, and you're right, legal fees, the costs are outrageous at this point. I think we keep it at the 10,000. If we don't use it, go into a reserve. And then at some point in the future, we can decide. But, I think that, we need to have that ability to go out to get some, get some advice from time to time.
Absolutely. Membership Adukas.
Bob, you're right. The key word I should have mentioned to everybody, retainer. You walk into a lawyer's office with anything that's half decent, and I mean, anything that we might encounter, even I could almost guarantee you there'd be a $5,000 retainer. And it'll be used.
Yep. So I think to everybody's point, if we leave that at 10,000, and as we're learning, our budget for 2025 was a first shot at the dark, what we thought we might need based on what some other boards around the province had. I know this is a topic of discussion at the OAPSB. A lot of boards are struggling with what is the right amount, what are the right buckets that you need the money in, and it's a bit of a trial and error. So what has been proposed for 2025 that you'll see in front of you is that our 2026 budget increased from what's currently the 73.6 up to 84,119, which is roughly about a $10,519 increase year over year. I'm not sure what the percentage is on that. With the board's approval, we can make that motion and we can send it to the CAO to be considered as part of the budget deliberations for the county. And if they come back with, say that's not acceptable, then we'll have to get back to the drawing board. Or if they round it out. And the other part that I'm not sure about is that, any wage increases for staff or benefits that may change. I've just based it on last year's numbers. So, Member Carter?
I was just going to say, I move it as amended with the stationery thing. So
we have a motion on the table, seconded by Member Shevadukas for an amended budget for 2026. The amendment being that the travel, meal, and allowance be at 1,000 and the office supplies be reduced to 500.
Second. Oh, Bob second.
Bob made the motion, Andy seconded it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, to be sent to the county for consideration or inclusion. Yep.
This. Moved by Member Carter, seconded by Member Shevadukas, that the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board 2026 draft budget be received as amended and that staff be directed to include it in the Haliburton County budget proposal.
All in favor? Thank you. Approved. And I should note, if again, provided by Sue, just for some comparators, when you look at this budget, the Lanark County Board budget is 146,000 compared to our small 10,000 or 84,000. So
They get better lunches.
moving on then to reports. Just a 8.1, just a quick update from the chair before I move on to our detachment commander. I had the pleasure of appearing before County Council last week to do a presentation on the activities of the board over the past year. Very well received, as I understand it, Warden. And again, thank you to the members that were present. What I am proposing and what I'm asking for approval from the board on is that we are required as a board to provide an annual report to council. The detachment commander also does an annual report, but we have to do a report on the board's activities. And I'm seeking approval from the board to have that presentation from last week considered as our annual report to the council, and to then be included and tagged on to the detachment commander's report that is coming to council next week. If people are comfortable with that, or if we have to do a separate staff report, if the county requires it, then Sue and I work on an independent staff report. But hopefully that will become an annual process for us, where we appear before council and give our annual report verbally, followed up by some sort of a documentation. Member Danielson, then member.
I'm just going to move that we approve your presentation to county council as your annual report as required.
Thank you.
And I was going to second it.
3 times.
Save staff a little bit of report, or a little bit of time and effort down.
Okay, moved by member Danielson and seconded by member Burton that the update from the chair be received and that the presentation of the chair made to Haliburton County Council, be considered as the annual report.
All in favor? So moved. Thank you. And now 8.2, finally, the much awaited report from our new detachment commander. I promised you would be gentle with her. It is her first experience in kick of the cat, but we'll work our way through it. So Deb, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background on me, this is my 24th year of policing. I started with Toronto Police when I was 19, and then wanted to come to the OPP. That was always my dream. I grew up in an OPP town near Orangeville, Ontario. But unfortunately, OPP was on a hiring freeze, so I did another jump to Orangeville Police, where I did 7 years in their crime unit there before coming to OPP. And my time in OPP has been spent in the West. So Wellington County is where I started, in the Guelph area. And then from there, I was promoted to staff sergeant in South Bruce, which is Walkerton and Kincardine area. And that's where I have been for the past year and a half before getting this position. Obviously, that's if some of you know the area or don't know the area, you're thinking, wow, that's a big jump. And it is. I'm excited about it. Had obviously some very mixed emotions about it as things are coming together for me as well. I had some emotional days this past week. But I'm excited to have taken this leap. It's a 4-hour move from, my dad and my sister and my kids. Even they're grown. They're 21 and 18, and they are gonna stay back. They're in school and do their thing. I realize and I know as soon as they come up to my lake house property, they're gonna end up wanting to come up all the time. So I'm not really worried about that. But it is a big leap for me. I'm super pumped to be here. I really am, to be a part of your community and to not only be the commander here, but to actually be involved and get out in the community. So thank you for having me. And please, anytime, any tips for me, anything like that, please reach out. I would really appreciate that. So as for the board report, you have them there, right, Blake? Or okay, which I'm not sure which one we're going to start with here, but we'll see what you pull up. Hopefully the detachment board report would be the first one if you can grab it. Oh, you got the calls for service. Okay, we'll start with that one. So before I get into this one, just after that presentation there with Lisa, the whole idea is, and this isn't the only board or detachment commander that has presented this report to the boards, but under the CSPA and after having her here, that was kind of the whole idea. They don't want us to be giving this report. It's kind of, as you can see from the calls, there's a lot of different oh, you have the wrong one. I think you might have. Oh, he's going down the agenda. So I'll just speak about it as we go through it. But they just want us to provide the detachment board report. So moving forward, that is all I'm going to give you guys is a detachment board report. The calls for service is really, as Lisa kind of explained, you have your billable portion. The provincial side of it has their billable portion, and everything kind of changes. That said, if there is something specific as we move forward that you like, we're a board now, we're forming together, and we're now a team. If you guys want something specific from me, just ask me. But this whole report, as from her presentation, is kind of redundant and kind of provides stats that it depends on the day in policing. It's very different each and every day. So from your budget reports what you're going to be billed already. So to go through this all the time, the OPP has said, no, we just want you to release the detachment board. So that's what it's going to be for all detachments provincially moving forward. That's the standard. But I didn't want to just come in here day one and say, hey, I'm not doing this. So let's go through this last one together. And then if there are questions moving forward, please reach out and let me know that, hey, Deb, at the next meeting, can you bring this information? And I'll make sure I get that for you. So just at that first page there, it just obviously she spoke about all of those different billing categories. So I won't go into too much detail there. What I will say about that high level, overall, the calls for service are down from this time last year by 53 calls. So year to date, we're down 388 calls, which is a lot of billable savings hours for the municipalities. On the next page there, Blake, if you want to keep going down there. So this goes into your violent crime categories. So there's a decrease of 14 calls in the violent crimes category from this time last year. So overall, that's a total savings of 360 billable hours. And then the next one, when you get down into, this is the big one there, property crime and stuff. And it is also fewer calls this year for year to date. There's been a reduction of 34 calls and year to date 93. So that's a total savings of 576.6 billable hours, which is pretty significant. Into the next one, your other criminal codes, so your bail violations, your breaches, that kind of stuff, anything with weapons, counterfeit, child pornography. There is an increase of 11 calls compared to this time last year, specifically in the breach of probations. This could directly be related to the Bail Reform Act and the OMAP, the offender management, because we're having specific units working on those wanted offenders and apprehending them. Policing also fluctuates, as Lisa covered and as I just stated. So it really is dependent. I mean, we could average out because when you go to the year-to-date averages there, we're actually down by 2. So we're still down by 15 billable calls, or 15 hours, sorry, compared to last year. Moving down to the drug possession, when you get into this, we are up in the drugs category by 1 call compared to this time last year, but year to date, we're down by 1. So again, we're savings of 6 hours. I know that the previous commander, Detachment Commander Kavanaugh, had spoke about the occurrence types within the communities, the drug type, and I know we just spoke about that within the schools as well. So that is a concern, the drugs that are within our communities. But again, our street crime unit, as well as we just talked about provincially, we've got 07 stuff that are engaged, and hopefully we continue to be proactive and enforce that. Down to the other drugs, when you talk about specifically trafficking of all those drugs there, cocaine, heroin, and opioids. We had 1 drug grow operation with 1 warrant execution and 1 trafficking for cocaine, but overall we're down this time. And year to date, we're down 8 for 528 billable hours, because those ones, as you know, as we spoke about, there's 88 hours, the time standard for those ones. So that's quite a significant savings for that. When we get into our other criminal code stats, that's a pretty big grouping there. It's the largest category, so our operations and stuff. So you got MVCs, sudden deaths, your phone calls, bylaws all fit within there. These calls in the reporting period are down to 327, and year to date they're down from 763 to 541, so huge savings. So that's a savings of 865.8 billable hours. Again, I can't explain that. The trends in policing are, you just never know what you're going to get. I don't know whether, you know, the storm, the ice storm and stuff impacted things and people weren't moving within our community as much. I'm not quite sure, but that's quite the savings and quite the drop. Operational 2, which kind of covers your alarms and your 911s. There is a slight increase of 15 calls, most of these being 911 calls and hangups. Again, very unpredictable thing. That could be something as simple. I'm not sure if any of you in the room have done a pocket dial, but we get a lot of those, and then that's obviously going to generate a call for service. Year to date, we're only up 4. So when you look at the actual whole year to date so far, that's not actually bad. So it's a matter of 7 billable hours for that category. For the statutes and act categories, we're down by 10 compared to this time last year. And year to date, we're down by 1 call, so for 4 billable hours. The calls were where we are up for in this reporting period appear to be landlord and tenant disputes and mental health calls. This could also be related to long winters with everyone. I mean, I think a lot of us are feeling those winter blues, to be honest with you. So that does affect those calls. Landlord tenants, I don't know if that's because of the population that we're dealing with as well around here with, you know, you're having the short-term rentals and stuff. It could be. Again, hard for me to know. I need to learn the area a little bit more myself to be able to answer some of those questions. When you get into traffic, so all of your collisions and stuff, we're down from 79 to 75 motor vehicle collisions, and year to date, we're down 42 for a total savable of 160 billable hours. So again, I'd say that's pretty good, especially considering from what I've heard, the winter you had up here. It's pretty good to be down considering road conditions and stuff. So overall, like I'm happy to see those numbers for the motor vehicle collisions. I'll tell you though, there sure are a lot of wild animals on the roadways up here. So are there any questions for that report or any questions moving forward? As I mentioned, I'm not going to present that one anymore, but if you have questions specifically about it, or if you have specific questions about your municipalities, like Lisa said, please feel free to reach out, email me. And if I don't know the answer, like she's the expert in all this stuff for Central Region. So I'll just give her a call or email her your direct question.
Member Carter.
Yeah, it's an awful lot of data, and it's, congratulations on having bike thefts down from 1 to 0 this year. That's 100% improvement. But I think what I would like to get from you is that anything that you and your team think is, important or significant or whatever. I mean, this time, obviously, there's a reduction in general in hours.
Yeah.
And that, that's significant. But if there's anything that you're seeing that you're kind of going, hey, we don't like that number. It may be just an anomaly or something, but it would be nice because you guys can look at the numbers and see something totally different than we do.
Yeah.
So if you could do that for us as opposed to the full report, that would be great from my perspective.
100%. That makes sense to me. Just bring some trends or something that we're noticing. Absolutely. We'll do that.
Member Hodgson.
Yeah, thank you and welcome. I appreciate you joining us and the enthusiasm for our community. That's exciting. For us as a community member, what I get asked all the time is, so folks obviously don't understand or appreciate, we're not in charge of your budget and whatnot, but allocation resources is always a question. And that's what you would get, I'm sure, in your 21 years of policing.
Yeah.
The question is, why do you have somebody out in a boat on a Wednesday when there's nobody on the lake, but we got kids selling drugs in the high school?
Mhm.
At its simplest form.
Mhm.
So unfortunately for the policymakers, for us to even get an insight, not that we can direct you on your budget necessarily, but we're participating and giving feedback. Those numbers are very helpful.
Mhm.
We can see that there was nobody drowned last year, for instance,
Mhm.
but we know that there's drug trafficking.
Mhm.
You've done some amazing the group that has highlighted that we're not immune, we're not separate from the rest of in the old days, we used to be able to give people a bus ticket and send them to Peterborough. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So, we have to deal with realities of today. And unfortunately, the numbers that you give us help us with that, even explaining to the community. So I don't know how we can, I guess not necessarily a question, just an observation on the numbers that you give us does help us talk to the community, but with us always looking at allocation resource and what's the best way to spend our policing dollars, as Bob has said, it's a huge budget for our county. So, bang for the buck is actually critical to our citizens. So, thank you.
Yeah, you'll still, and to your point, like wanting to know what's going on and stuff like, so that's what this board report is doing. That's more of like that other report that was provided in the past was more of like your billable hours, like kind of exactly what Lisa went through. So this next report you're going to see, it's still actually going to show the drug calls and stuff like that. And to everyone's point there, I will certainly bring the bigger trends, or if you guys hear something, that's happened as well, reach out to me and I can also provide that information at that point as well. So.
Thanks for that, Deb. That's where I was going to try and take us next. 'Cause I knew this was coming up right up. So you're still going to get the trends.
Yeah.
We're still going to, so maybe we can move on to that part. And that may
Absolutely.
answer the questions that we just received.
Thanks, Blake. So yeah, we'll move on to the actual board report. So this is the new board report that's been generated under the CSBA, and this is what all commanders are going to be using. No, not that one.
It was next up in the board agenda, Blake. Page 49.
There we go. Perfect. So this will be provided as per normal all the time. This is the new report that they've approved provincially. So this is what is used by all commanders. So you'll see here on the first one, it talks about motor vehicle collisions and the types. So there's been no fatal motor vehicle collisions in this reporting period. So the reporting period being from March to May. Non-fatal, there are 3, which is still down by 80%. And then property damage, we're at 72, which is also down. So overall, in this category alone, we're seeing a reduction of 25% in motor vehicle collisions. If you move to the next page, it just kind of breaks it down a little bit more. So basically, again, this is talking about fatalities this year, in the reporting period. There's been no fatalities for this reporting period. So that's what you're seeing on that page. Moving down to the next one, criminal code and provincial statutes. So criminal code non-traffic offenses are down slightly by 10.2%. The criminal code traffic are also down by 23.3%. Highway traffic is down by 10.5. LLA is down by 44%. And all other categories there are also down. So overall, we're down 9.9% in this category. And then if you move down to traffic related there, so when we talk about the big 4s there, the speeding, seatbelts and impaired and distracted driving, traffic related charters, we do see a decrease of 9.8% in speeding, a 300% increase though in seatbelt charges going from 3 to 12. Impaired charges are down slightly by 21%, and we have 6 distracted driving charges. A reduction in some categories, but again, I would also suggest that the municipality during this reporting period, March to May, was impacted by some other significant things going on. So our resources were directed there. So I think that kind of explains why. That would be my guess. When you go to e-ticketing, on the next page, so e-ticketing warrants are down 136, so 60.5%. To me, this shows discretion by members. They're getting out there and they're educating motorists roadside, which has huge impacts on the community members as a whole. They are also enforcing when appropriate or issuing the paper warnings because they're available now as well. So these warnings are up. And that's because before in the day, we used to just go roadside and we would just verbally warn. So now we actually track our warnings, which is good too, but we want to see the warnings down, and we want to see more education or enforcement. So that's kind of what that explains there. As I mentioned, the big 4 are your speeding, distracted driving, seatbelts, and impaired. So that's kind of our focus within the OPP there. Sorry, there's a duplicate page there. I'm not sure why. So there's 2 of e-ticketing. So like if you want to move down to violent crime, that'd be great. So violent crimes, there is a reduction in sexual offenses down to 4, which is a 50% reduction. They're known offenders to the victim, nothing serial in nature. Assaults, firearms related are down to 16, so it's a reduction of 27.3. Other offenses involving violence threats are also down by 7, so 53.3 reduction. Overall, in this reporting period for our violent crime categories, we're down to 27. So that's great to see. Obviously, we don't want to have that category high. Moving down to the next one for property crime. So property crime B&Es are down to 8, so 38.5 reduction. Theft over is down to 4, so 55.6. Theft under is down to 14. And fraud is down to 4, so that's a 78.9% reduction. I'm going to attribute this from talking to the previous commander as well as officers around the office as I'm starting to learn things. We're doing more educational sessions, so kind of that educational piece too on drugs that we're hoping to get, and I want to also do that moving forward. I think that for the fraud with our vulnerable population here, as mentioned earlier as well, to do those educational sessions so that they're aware of those possible frauds that they can be involved in. So that's good to see that reduction. Mischief is also down by 46.2%. So overall, we are down 47.1% in this category in property crimes. If you move down to drug crime, we're down to 2 drug offenses for possession this year, so down by 50%. Both of these are relating to vehicle-related incidents by frontline members, so kind of those traffic stops that they're out involved, could be an impaired driving. They're pulling the drugs from the vehicle. Of note, there's our CSU unit also works with CKL on any of those major drug units or drug calls as well. When you get down to the top 5 violations, so still on that page, just a little bit lower there, theft under is down, assaults, firearm related are down, frauds are down, fails to comply with release orders are down, mischiefs are down, and provincial offenses are down. So all of them are slightly down compared to this time last year, which is a great thing as well. When you get down to other crimes on the next page, we are down in all compared to this time last year by 33.3%. The impacts in the community could also be affecting this. Like I said, the unpredictable calls, and then also with the ice storm that occurred here too. I'm not sure, or if there's not as many as we talked about the cottage country here and stuff, not an influx of people. Again, you just never really know with policing. Our clearance rate for violent crime, there is a decrease of almost 3%. Property crimes is our clearance rate is 22% down. And the decreases are due basically because the investigations are still ongoing. So as we kind of mentioned in that billing model, which was great for you to see the kind of time allotted to it, the hours, a lot of times, some of these more complex investigations take longer and there's more follow-up to do, whether that means more statements and stuff. So that could affect these numbers. And I think that when we do the next report, when we run that, our clearance rate, those calls will get cleared off and investigated more thoroughly, because that's what we want to see. We want to see them investigated more thoroughly. So I think that that's where you're seeing that. It's going to fluctuate from time to time. The other category is down, but provincial statutes is up for the clearance rate. So again, it's just, there's still investigations that are being ongoing here. The unfounded, there's an overall reduction to 19 calls, so 26.9%. Other is up 5 compared to this time last year. These are calls where a criminal act is alleged, and then through that hard work of the officers out there doing the investigations, it's determined that no criminality occurred. This is going to fluctuate too, because you never know. You get, we mentioned sometimes we're getting called to what we're being dispatched as a domestic, and then you get there and maybe it's not, or even a break and enter, and you get there and all of a sudden maybe somebody says, oh, actually I left that open and nothing is taken. There's just so many variables here, but that's what that is. Through that investigative work of the members, they've determined that no criminal offense actually occurred. Our public complaints, these are up compared to this time last year by 2, so there's 4 of them. These are still under investigation, but what I can tell you from digging into them is that 2 of them are from an internal complaint incident, which is likely to be unsubstantiated. It takes time. These things can sometimes take quite a few months to deal with. And then the other is SIU investigation from the incident in April. So if you know anything about SIU, sometimes, they're better, especially better with our body-worn cameras and in-car cameras. But again, sometimes those things they used to be a year sometimes at times. So that's what those are from. So I'm not concerned about those at all. Our DAR. So this is where we talk about, you know, our data integrity and the SDM stuff. And, you know, there's always that room for improvement, because although a lot of it is populated, and kind of goes into our system, the officers do then have to go in and, I'm going to use the term tidy up. They will have to go in and kind of tidy up their DARs and make sure. But basically, it's showing 661 cruiser patrol hours, 2 aircraft hours, which is from the ice storm, 8.2 marine hours so far, which is down. But again, we just kind of are getting our summer months now here, which, so we haven't had an opportunity really to get the boat out too much. 63 foot patrol hours. So that again is slightly down, and 0 patrols in the school. There are community engagement events, so that's a different thing. It's not going to capture here like this says. You can see over on the left there how it actually reads. It says patrol foot. When we are going into the school and doing those educational pieces, they come up as community engagement is how it is. So it's a different DAR code. So overall, it is down a little bit, but I again would attribute this to the state of emergency is what I would think that has been going on with the ice storm and everything. So the officers have been kind of shifted to that. That was their priority for that. And I think you'll start to see the increase there for that. Youth charges by disposition and type. So there's been 0 youth charges in this reporting period. So this is down. So year to date, there's been 4 diversions. And when we talk about mental health, calls for service, we're down to 52 for this year, 4 being unfounded. Majority of these calls are mental health act specifically. 13 are attempt or threat suicide. When I'm done this report, I wanted to share a little bit about MCERT and mental health because I did take the time to watch the meeting you guys had was that last month? I believe it was, yeah, last month. And I know there was some questions surrounding MCERT and mental health, so I'll get into that in a second with just a few other stats about that. Overdoses, 1 fatal overdose, non-opioid in this reporting period. This investigation is actually ongoing and it's only suspected to be a drug overdose at this time. So it may not even turn out to be that. It's still, got the PM results and stuff. So I can't say for certain, but that's what it was flagged as for appearing that way. When you get down to referrals to victim services, referrals continues to occur. They are slightly down from this time last year, but year to date, they're almost exactly the same. The acceptance rates, though, are up. So the more we're offering that to members in the community at these calls, they're accepting more. So that's really great to see. That's what we want, is we just want our officers to continue to offer that and have them engaged. And that is it for that report. Are there any questions for that report before I give you some MCERT updates?
Seeing none, I think you're good to continue.
Okay. So again, I'm just going to kind of capture the March to May period. I just had our MCERT officer kind of give me a snapshot of things. So there's been, MCERT has been involved in 117 calls for service in this time frame alone. 53 of these calls are mental health related, and then the others reflect basically they're going to a domestic dispute or family dispute, even drugs and youth diversions, and they're engaged. So they're engaged a lot. They're out there with my MCERT officer and engaging in, I always found this, and MCERT is really near and dear to me. In my old detachment, I was actually just able to secure a second MCERT worker for them before I left. And it's remarkable to see when you're out at a call, even something as simple as a motor vehicle collision where somebody hits a deer. You'd be surprised at how that may truly impact somebody, and that MCERT worker just being there and having that kind of connection, and then that referral base happening for them, just other things from a call that you would never suspect can generate that MCERT intervention. And it's wonderful to see. So I love seeing that there's also those other calls for services where the MCERT worker is engaged. Results of some of the MCERT calls, there's been 11 voluntary transports to the hospital without grounds for apprehension. So that's actually great to see too. The MCERT worker has kind of worked with that person to say, hey, you are suffering. Would you consider some medical attention? And they go voluntary. 17 involuntary apprehensions, so under the Mental Health Act. 1 was apprehended under an existing form, And then 2 criminal charges resulted from these occurrences. So that's not terrible, but suspected that that happens obviously with mental health. As for the hospital, admitted 25% of those, 13% were released, and then 62% are unspecified. And unspecified only means we don't have the data because we've been released from the hospital prior to knowing what's happening with that patient. Or they were not apprehended, they were just kind of that voluntary at the hospital, so we don't get those results as well. So overall, MCERT is out there working hard, making those connections within our communities, which is, like I said, what we want to see within with our MCERT workers. So it's great. And then I just lastly, same thing, the previous commander kind of said to highlight some of the things that were going on. So I did have a PowerPoint here created with just some of the things. So if you want to grab that for me, Blake, that'd be great. Yeah, yeah, thank you. So again, there's 2 slides in here, and I'm not sure how that happened. So obviously it didn't capture my other one. So I apologize for that. But just to show the hard work of the guys that are out there. So again, this is previous to me coming, and hopefully you'll see a lot more. And I'll continue to do these if this is something you like. But I think it's great to highlight the hard work that the officers are doing there. But on May 20th, we got an impaired charge as a result of ride program. So the officers are out there engaging in that and doing those ride programs, and then as a result, an impaired driver charge happens. The next one is the same, and sorry about that. Then we have the media release about the ice storm. So just reminding people that there's ice, that there was an emergency, and to basically make sure that they stay clear of the moving waters and to be cautious. As everybody in this room knows, and even me, who I wasn't here during this time, that completely impacted our community, and we had a lot of resources and we came together. I had met with the CAO yesterday and had a good chat with her about that. And she just, reiterated the great teamwork with everybody that was involved in that, and how the community kind of, and not just, us in this room in emergency services, community in general, the population, how everyone came together. So that's great to see. So that media release is just highlighting that amazing work that was done. And then, of course, the First Responders Day, which I just missed before I came here. So again, that was in May, and we had other resources like K9 came out, ERT came out. We had our quads there and stuff in our boat. And again, talking to the CAO yesterday, and I was shocked to hear that it used to be separate. She had mentioned yesterday that it used to be, we had our own set up at ours, and then ambulance had one in fire, but that this year was the first year together. I love that, and I said that I would like to keep that continuing. I think it's great for our community members to go to one-stop shop as well, but also for us as emergency services. Again, we're all a big team here, and we need to work together and be that family. So that was great to see as well. I can tell you Monday we have coming up it's not on here because it's not Monday yet. But we're engaging in a soccer game at the Archie Stoker School there. So we're excited about that. And yeah, so we'll continue to get that community engagement as much as we can with what we have, right? Our staffing and stuff. So again, super excited to be here. You'll see me out a lot of things too, both on and off duty. Like I said, I want to get to know the community and plan to retire here. Hopefully we'll see what the future brings, but I don't want to move. So I love my house and love the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Deb. We'll just look for any questions from the members of the board. If I can, just 2 quick, and it's more of, I guess, a comment more than a question, but based on you, I know we're not going to get this report in the future, but the 911 hangups.
Yeah.
What do the OPP policy on responding to those, if I'm not mistaken, says you must respond to identify, so it generates that calls for service.
They've changed that, so let me confirm, because
Okay.
that presentation that Lisa just gave us, when she talked about the FSU and like the deferrals and stuff, I noticed on that page, and actually that was my question for her, so I'll follow up with her, but they have changed it. They've done a lot of, like, if we can get in contact with them and stuff, depending on the circumstances, we're not responding to all of them again, no. So they have deferred that, but I'll follow up on that for you.
Okay, because again, if there's a role for the board to play in educating the public, if we can do something to support that and saying,
100%.
like, make sure you don't have those hang up calls, and if you do, stay on the line when they call you back and deal with it, as opposed to having to have to send an officer all the way out there.
Right.
And then the other one, the calls for service. And I just want to be clear on this because I think sometimes people look at if the calls are all down in those categories that you showed us, they may think the officers aren't necessarily going to those calls. The call for service is still generated, correct? So it may sit in pending for a day or 2 days, but they still respond to that call. So it's not a case of we're not deploying the right resources right now. It's more about the calls aren't coming in.
Exactly. That's exactly what that means. Yes.
All right. And then just building on the budget presentation earlier, something that I think, Liz, you had talked about earlier, and I think this is where we do have a role to play. When we start looking at the local action plan, and although that's the detachment commander's responsibility to create that local action plan, it does legislatively allow for us to have some engagement with the commander on that. And that's where when you start looking, I think, hearing about your comments, Andrew, about the need for not being on the water and need to be in the school and need to be, that's where I do think we have a role to play as a board. And I think between now and our September meeting, I would love that opportunity to bring some of those comments to the commander and maybe even arrange an offline meeting of the board or a meeting with the commander just to say, hey, this is what we're hearing in the communities. How are we going to address that as part of a local action plan? I think that is our role. And if we can, and as opposed to getting into the nitty gritty of directing those operations, we do have a role to say, this is where we'd like to spend the resources. And, Section 17 does allow us to, I think we heard there's a moratorium on officers right now, but there's not a moratorium on civilian support. So if, for example, collision reporting centers or alternate response models and encouraging people to use that alternate response model, online reporting, then saves the officer having to go to that house to meet the person to take that report for a minor incident, which then allows the officer to go and do other things. So that's where I think we do have a role to play as a board. And if it means hiring 2 more admin support staff at a smaller cost than hiring a police officer to allow the police officers to do what they want to do, those are decisions we can try and impart as a board. So I'm looking forward to that engagement, Deb, in the months ahead, so that when we come back in the fall, we can formalize that action plan and put something to paper to say, this is what the board is hearing from the community. Member Carter?
So I've heard this a couple of times today. There's a freeze on hiring officers.
And
Is
that's
that-
no
What is the freeze on?
It's a moratorium on, I did ask that at the break, it's a moratorium on redeployment of officers right now. So they're not going to give any more officers to us at this point in time because they only have certain staffing levels across the province they're trying to meet. So it
Okay.
would mean until they can hire more, they can't deploy more. So there's not a hiring freeze. There's just a moratorium on sending them to us until they get their numbers up.
It's a real challenge to us, obviously. If we talk about when do you need, OPP presence on the water, it would probably be the weekend when most of the boats are on the water. Unfortunately, that's also the time when the traffic is the highest and all the other calls are the highest. And so the OPP have to deploy their folks to, where the most urgent need is. And that's why they have spare time on Wednesday to get into a boat, an ATV or a snowmobile. And so this is the question and this is the issue we have of the fact that we probably have an undermanned force based on the number of calls, but we're paying for the 20,000 plus homes that are in the area.
And that, to your point, Member Carter, is exactly where I think the board needs to focus and get on that consultation piece that they talked about with the government and say, change that model as to, you heard Lisa talk about the Wasaga Beach model and they pay for pay duties, or for the Boots and Hearts and paying for pay duties. If we think there's a need, then how do we increase during those peak times and not during the non-peak times?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, thank you for bringing up the action plan because that is something, again, new to me. I've never done one, but it was mentioned to me that that's coming, and I wanted to actually bring that up. That in consultation with you, like those pillars of crime and community safety, well-being, and traffic, like those kind of are going to stay the same. But exactly, we are to consult together with one another, and I want to know, and that's great that you brought it up to see what your interesting points are that I can add and actually add to the action plan as well. So thank you for that.
So I just need a motion, if I could, to accept the report of the detachment commander and the call for service billing summary. Member Carter, Member Danielson, comment from Member Danielson before we go to the motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how wonderful it is to hear you, hear the excitement that you've got in coming here, that, that you intend to retire here, that you bought a house here. It's like music to our ears. I mean, we've had some really fabulous detachment commanders, but, it's been a shifting thing for us, and it's really nice to see that we're going to have some stability, and it's welcome news.
Thank you. And, again, I had just, off the record here, I know it's all on the record, but I had an interview yesterday with the paper, and the question was exactly that, like, do I plan on staying? And like, I hope you guys understand, I can't obviously promise. I have no idea what the foreseeable future would be, but I wanted to share the fact that I have moved 4 hours away from my family, and I hope that shows you that I am committed. But I just, tomorrow I could get a call from my family that says, hey, we need you back home. I don't know. So I am committed for sure. And yes, I don't want to move again. So I hope to retire here. So thank you.
Over to Pam to read the motion.
Okay, then. Moved by Member Carter and seconded by Member Danielson that the detachment commander update be received.
All in favor? So moved. Thank you. Just quickly through the last few pieces of our agenda, communication and correspondence. We received none since the last meeting, so you have no correspondence communication report. There's no closed session, notice of upcoming business, none. So the next is our date of our next meeting is scheduled for September 24th, 2025. So we take our July and August summer break. However, important for the board to know, if we do need to convene a meeting, we have the ability under the act to convene a meeting, and we'll do that through email distribution if we find there's a need for an emergency meeting or for the board to convene at some point in the summer. But other than that, our next meeting is scheduled for September 24th. And then I'll just look for a motion for adjournment. Member Shevadukis, Member Danielson, so he was looking this way.
Moved by Member Shevadukis, seconded by Member Danielson, be it resolved that the June 18th, 2025 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board now adjourn at 11:55.
All in favor? So moved.